Hello, my name is Shai. I want to show you my process for making this burning animation. This shader might look complicated, but if you follow my simple steps, I know you can make it too. Let's start from the beginning. The first ingredient to making this animation is to separate XYZ and add noise to the gradient. Then you can use an absolute operation and invert it to make this mask. Now let's make this ring emit light. Add a mix shader node and use this as a factor between a diffuse and an emission shader. This means the mask is choosing between diffuse and emissive shaders. We shouldn't use a solid color as our emission. We want the center of this effect to look red and the edges to look yellow. To do this, we can bring in an RGB node, followed by an HSV node, and plug our mask into the hue input. These are not the hues we want, so let's add a mix node with our mask as the factor. Let's set both of these values to 0.5. 0.5 means it shows the original colors on an HSV node. In my case, that's red. Now we can slightly shift the hues on the edge of our effect to make them look yellow. Now let's go back to our node setup and view the node right before we use our absolute operation. We can use this as a mix between our shader and transparency. If you're an Eevee, transparency is opaque. To fix this, you can go to your material settings, toggle the settings menu, and switch it from opaque to alpha clip. If you want a blend between transparency and your shader, you can use alpha hashed or alpha blend. I will use alpha hashed. Before we displace our mesh, we need to make sure we have a lot of geometry to change. Basically, the more subdivisions you have, the more definition your displaced geometry will have. I recommend adding a subdivision surface modifier set to simple. This means it's not really changing the shape of our object, just its topology. And switch your render feature set to experimental. Keep in mind, the experimental option is only available in Cycles and not Eevee. Once it is set to experimental, you can set this subdivision surface modifier to adaptive subdivision. I recommend watching a video on adaptive subdivision since it's useful for displacing geometry. The very last step for displacing your geometry is to open your N panel by hitting N, selecting the Options tab, going to Settings, Surface, and switch the setting from bump only to displacement only. And now we can close our panel and bring our ring mask into a vector displacement node. This rotation got weird, so I'm using a mapping node to alter its Z rotation. If you have some visual issues, you could try setting your vector displacement node to object or world space. And after tweaking your shader to get the look you want, you should have a pretty similar system. The scale of the vector displacement can always be changed here. You can always add or subtract from your original gradient to shift it up or down, and you can switch the colors at any time. Just as a tip, I really recommend using this mix to hue system because using one color as your emission, as I'll show now, is really jarring to look at. It's just a solid color all the way through, and this turns yellow the farther away it gets from the burning edges. You can do a lot more with this effect. For example, changing the scale, or the detail, the roughness, and the distortion. What I did in my shader was set this noise texture to 4D and set the W slider to the frame. This means it's changing its seed every frame, so it's distorting similar to fire. This is obviously a pretty cool sci-fi effect too, so you can change the colors to make any kind of fabrication or disintegration effect. And you don't need to do it on the Z-axis. You can switch it to the Y, the X, or you could rotate the gradient with a vector rotate node. If you want a simple diagonal effect, you can add two axes together. And yeah, that's a short video on this cool effect. There's a lot more you can do with it. Thanks for watching. Catch you later. Bye.